Good morning, guys. Everything new under the sun. Well, the narrative today, prophetically speaking, I think, is that all signs are converging, and I've said that before. But taking a look at Matthew 24, we can see, if you read between the lines of Matthew 24, you can see more things going on. Matthew 24 is about Jesus departing the temple, saying that the temple is going to be destroyed, and what's going to happen in the last days. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. Pay attention. There's a lot of fake news out there. Read Jesus saying there's a lot of fake news out there. Don't believe it. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And what are you going to hear? You're going to hear of wars, rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. Expect these things, wars, rumors of wars. We're going to talk about that today. For nation shall rise against nation, and that doesn't necessarily mean war. You could also read into that economic war, tariffs, etc., trade wars that we see happening between the U.S. and China, for example. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and you talk about kingdoms, you talk about Saudi Arabia and Jordan and other known kingdoms, and there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. Now read famines there. Now that doesn't necessarily just mean drought. A famine doesn't necessarily have to mean there's a drought. You can have a famine if you simply have economic collapse, and I think that is certainly one of the features that is coming. And pestilences. If you think about economic collapse as well, what does that cause? Well, that causes sanitation systems to stop working, because if an economic collapse occurs and the sanitation employees are not working, that means city sanitation pumps and sewers, etc., are not flowing, are not being clean, and that means you have a rise in bugs and rats and all these other things that come along with the lack of utilities going. So really, you could read into a lot of this and say, you know what, a lot of this is not necessarily in and of itself just a miraculous event. It certainly doesn't need to be. The Bible doesn't state that these need to be miraculous events. I think the one of the interpretations is simply that an economic collapse is part of what triggers or pushes forward a lot of these things. And earthquakes, it says. We just had a massive 6.3, I think, in Japan, and earthquake in Japan, and there's been a large number of tremors. And so this is the biggest earthquake in Japan for, obviously, the year 2019. And where are earthquakes going to be happening? Well, they're going to be happening in diverse places. Someone in my comment stream suggested that diverse places really means divers places. So people who dive underwater, and reading into it that meant underwater. Now, there will be quakes underwater, but diverse, as it is in the KJV in the Bible, that means diverse, in many different places. But I suppose you could also read it in diverse places, although that's not the original intent of the text there to mean underwater, but certainly they are happening underwater as well. And what does it say? These are the beginning of sorrows. This is just the start of all the things that are coming upon the world. It's going to get way worse than that. And so I think we see the beginning of sorrows happening now. And then it says, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And many will be offended. How many are offended now with all the hate speech out there? Everything you say about anybody causes offense, and so you can't say anything about anybody because they are offended. This is the whole snowflake generation, where no matter what you say, people are going to be offended by it. And they shall betray you. In what was it? In Sweden, I believe, there's an article about them now betraying one another by way of hate speech. So if anybody considers anybody else's comments on Facebook, social media, etc., hate speech, they will betray you and send you to the judges and to the police. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. And what of this? Because iniquity shall abound, because sin is overwhelming and abounding, the love of many will grow cold. People are going to get sick of it, and they're just going to start looking out for themselves after a while, because they can't handle all the hate and the violence, etc., that's happening. So let's take a look at a couple of things here to start off, which I think are easily windows into and describe the Matthew 24 events. Well, this is from HalTurnerRadioShow.com. The yellow vest protesters in France are looking to cause a bank run, and I think this is interesting. They've actually, not only are they planning to cause it, they've already triggered it, because now French citizens are going out to their banks prior to this event, effectively running on the bank because they think there is going to be a run on the bank. France bank run this Saturday, 8 a.m., protesters to crash the banks. And you look at this, and this is, again, one of those things that could tip the scales and really cause panic in Europe, which could spread around the world and cause economic collapse. Any one of these things could be a trigger event. And if they have a big enough following and they have banks running out of money, yeah, you could easily trigger economic collapse just by bank runs. In a bare-knuckles effort to collapse the French government, remember that who was the French government leader? Emmanuel, God with us, Macron. Many have said, and I think he's an interesting case. If you're looking for Antichrist figures, he certainly seems to be one that could fit that. He may not be the Antichrist, but he's an interesting figure. His first name, Emmanuel, means God with us, and he wants to rule like God Jupiter. So, I mean, if you look at his aspirations for a world government, global community, that's part of the reason why the French citizens don't like him, because he is so global in his mindset and not a national. His plan is to be a god and to rule the world effectively. That's part of what he wants to put forward. And interesting, his name means God with us. So maybe he thinks he is the God that is with human society. It says, in a bare-knuckles effort to collapse the French government, Yellow Jacket protesters are abuzz on social media with a plan for this Saturday. This is coming bank run at 8 a.m. For the past 8 weeks or so, tens of thousands of French citizens have taken to the streets in protest. It says social media is abuzz. Deliberate bank run starting Saturday 8 a.m. The trouble is, it says, French citizens see these plans revealed. They are heading to the banks right now today. So Wednesday, they're heading to the banks today to pull out money prior to this bank's run. So effectively, they have triggered a bank run, and the bank run is occurring right now. This is literally a catastrophe in the making for France and its government in particular. Going after the financial system via an intentional bank run will kill the country economically. There's no getting around it. This is what the article says, and I believe that is accurate. There simply isn't enough cash in circulation to cover withdrawals. That's what people don't understand. Your money does not exist except in ones and zeros in the digital form. There's not enough cash for everybody to take their money out of the bank. So if people start trying to do that, that means there's a bank run, and this is going to cause a loss of confidence. And the fiat currencies around the world need confidence in order to stay afloat, to stay solvent, and confidence is quickly being lost. More economic trouble. S&P downgrades PG&E to junk, launching countdown to 800 million collateral call. And this looks like one of those big corporations in the U.S. This is the California Energy Utility. They are bankrupt. They are going to file for bankruptcy, possibly. And they've been downgraded to junk status as more countries around the world are looking basically to collapse. And as you have one of these companies, large companies, go down, you're going to look at a cascade triggering domino effect, which pulls down the economy. So this is what's happening in the United States. Late on Monday, the question got some closure after S&P became the first rating agency to take a machete to its rating for PG&E when it downgraded the company by 5 notches from BBB minus to B, the 5th highest junk rating. S&P warned that more cuts are imminent, and so this is going to trigger the company to file for bankruptcy, as California investigators have been looking into whether the utilities equipment ignited the deadliest blaze in 2017. So the whole City of Paradise fire that occurred. They think PG&E's setup and equipment effectively caused that. So you have a crash of these companies, a bankruptcy, and you'll have the Federal Reserve even looking into being very dovish, looking into actually lowering rates again because they see the economy is going into recession. And what do we have across the world in terms of in relation to the markets and the trade tariffs and the trade wars that are going on with Trump? This is AmericanMilitaryNews.com. Be ready for war crisis. China President Xi Jinping tells army. So China is getting ready for war, and the president, of China is now saying, get ready for war. China knows what's happening around the world. They know stability is being lost, and they're getting ready for war. China's armed forces should be ready for combat and be prepared for unexpected crisis and war, President Jinping said Friday in his first meeting with top military brass in 2019. The massive and rapidly modernizing People's Liberation Army should have enhanced awareness of danger, crisis, and war, Xi told a meeting of Central Military Commission, the top military organization in the country. It is effectively being seen as Xi's first order to the military in 2019, where he also signed a mobilization command for the training of armed forces through the year. Besides the festering land border problem with India, it comes in a background of continuing maritime territorial disputes, the whole South China Sea, and growing tensions with the U.S. over Beijing's aim to reunify Taiwan, which it considers a breakaway nation. Obviously, add to that the whole trade war that's going on between China and the U.S. So yeah, they're gearing up for war. He brought up Taiwan days after President Trump signed an Asia Reassurance Initiative to act into law, reaffirming the U.S. commitment to the island's security. So on the one front, the trade tariff front, they're looking to get rid of the trade war and deal with that. On the other front, they're building up militaries, and they're coming to a confrontational state as it relates to the South China Seas and Taiwan. So this is what's happening in the world, and can you see now Matthew 24, which could easily be referring to an economic collapse of sorts in terms of famines, pestilences. You can see nations rising against nations. I didn't cover articles about Iran, Turkey getting together militarily. All sorts of other articles I didn't even cover today, but I think Matthew 24 is underway. I think in terms of the timeline, we're getting very, very close to economic collapse. I think also that should there be a pre-tribulation rapture, I think there's a lot of very interesting evidence that could happen this year, and maybe prior to or occurring in the September-October timeframe during the switchover into the new year for Israel. It's a very, very interesting year for the rapture event to occur. And I'll probably be doing videos about that later, but be prepared, guys. I think ultimately there may be a short period where you need to use your prep items, your food, your water, your off-grid, solar power stuff, etc. But I think that time may be shorter than we expect, especially if you are saved. If you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, it may be that there's not going to be a lot of time for you to make use of that stuff prior to the rapture event. We'll see. I still kind of think the economic collapse is going to come prior to a rapture event. I think we're going to see some of that. And so some of these preparations may come in handy, just like Egypt and Joseph in Egypt. In the 7 good years, he stored up food to be prepared to feed himself and others in the 7 bad years. We need to be wise and be prepared for things if we see them coming. If we look at the signs and line them up with Bible prophecy and see that this particular event could be happening, you need to be prepared. And God gives us that wisdom and that brain for that sort of thing, and the ability, and He blesses us abundantly. But on the other side of things, I don't think we are going to be around too long either, so we may not need to survive for years, I don't think. It's a very, very interesting year, 2019. I think in terms of timeline, again, economic collapse occurs, and then we start seeing Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38, and maybe even Psalm 83 prior to Isaiah 17, destruction of Damascus, which is Israel taking out the nations on its direct borders. And of course, we have collusion with Hamas, and they want to set up wars on north and south, northern and southern borders of Israel. They want to start going to war against Israel. So these are the things that I see coming. These are the news events that I think are converging that create a narrative of end-time Bible prophecy being fulfilled before our eyes, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll leave it there. See you guys in the next video.